From the moment she stepped off the plane in Manila, she felt like the air itself had a different rhythm. The sun was bright, the city hummed with energy, and even the traffic had a personality of its own. But what caught her attention most wasn't the bustling streets or the towering skyscrapers. It was the way people treated each other, and in particular the men she encountered. She was a Ukrainian woman, 28 years old, confident, independent, and used to the straightforward, sometimes blunt culture of Kiev. Here in the Philippines, she noticed a subtle difference, one that she hadn't expected to find so fascinating: Filipino chivalry. It began with the simplest things. A man opening a door for an elderly neighbor, carefully guiding a child across the street, or helping someone carry bags without expecting a thank you. She had read about Filipino politeness and hospitality before, but seeing it in action was like watching a choreographed dance, effortless, yet sincere. She noticed that men seemed to take pride in being considerate, in anticipating needs, in making others feel respected. It wasn't just about romance, it was about a culture of care. Her first personal encounter was almost accidental. She had gotten lost in Intramuros, the historic district in Manila, wandering the narrow cobblestone streets with a heavy backpack and a map that might as well have been in another language. A young man approached her, noticing her confusion, and offered to guide her to the main square. There was no ulterior motive, no expectation. He walked beside her, explaining the history of the streets, pointing out centuries-old churches and walls, and even stopping to let her try local street food. She found herself laughing more freely than she had in months, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the tropical sun. It wasn't just the big gestures. Small acts accumulated and created a pattern. Every time she went to a coffee shop, someone would instinctively pull out a chair for her or offer to carry a heavy package. At first, she was surprised, sometimes unsure how to react. In Ukraine, independence was prized above all, and being assisted could feel like a subtle reminder of her own vulnerability. Here, it felt different. It was an invitation to trust, to relax, and to enjoy the moment. She realized that chivalry was not condescending. It was considerate, intentional, and culturally ingrained. Her curiosity led her to ask friends and colleagues why Filipino men behaved this way. She discovered that respect was deeply intertwined with family values and social norms. From a young age, boys were taught to honor women, to be attentive, and to value relationships. It wasn't performative. It was expected, natural, and reinforced by the people around them. The more she learned, the more she understood why her interactions with men here felt so different from those back home. In Ukraine, romantic gestures were often direct and pragmatic. Here, they were poetic and consistent, sometimes playful, sometimes subtle, but always genuine. Her fascination soon took a more personal turn. She met a young Filipino man named Daniel. For the purpose of the narrative, we'll avoid using real names. He was kind, patient, and had a quiet confidence. Their first meeting was ordinary, at a local market where she was trying to buy tropical fruits, unsure how to ask for their names in Tagalog. Daniel approached, smiled, and patiently translated, even suggesting a few tastings to help her decide. She laughed at her own mistakes, embarrassed but charmed by his patience. That day, he insisted on carrying her heavy grocery bag to the taxi stand, and she found herself quietly appreciating the gesture without feeling diminished. It was foreign to her, and yet it felt natural, warm, and comforting. Over the next few weeks, she began noticing a pattern in her social interactions. Men would offer seats on crowded jeepneys, assist in carrying luggage at the airport, or politely insist she eat before them at a restaurant. The gestures were not just limited to Daniel. Across the city, she observed chivalry everywhere, like a cultural thread weaving the social fabric. She started recording small moments in her journal, realizing that these tiny acts, repeated daily, created a cumulative emotional effect. She was beginning to feel that perhaps she had underestimated the power of consistent kindness and respect in shaping perceptions of love and relationships. Her reflections deepened when she attended a traditional Filipino family gathering. Invited by a friend, she entered a home buzzing with laughter, children running, and elders sharing stories. She watched the men in the family, how they engaged with their relatives, how they interacted with her, always polite, attentive, and protective without being overbearing. They served food, guided elders to seats, and ensured everyone was comfortable. It struck her that in this culture, chivalry was not reserved for romantic partners, but extended to the community, reinforcing a sense of care and responsibility. The behavior was so consistent, so embedded, that it felt like a natural law rather than a learned habit. She found herself thinking about her own experiences with love. Back in Ukraine, dating had often felt transactional, or at least fraught with ambiguity. Gestures of affection could be sporadic or exaggerated, sometimes leaving her wondering if they were genuine. Here, she noticed a steady, gentle rhythm. The Filipino approach was slower, patient, and deliberate. Actions mattered more than words, and the consistency of those actions created a deep sense of security. She realized that what she was witnessing was not merely flirtation or tradition, but a foundational principle in building meaningful relationships. Her observations extended beyond romantic interactions. Even strangers showed what could only be described as instinctive respect. In the bustling streets of Quezon City, someone would help her maneuver through traffic. In cafes, baristas offered her the best seating without her asking. When she missed a bus, strangers guided her to the next one, ensuring she felt safe and attended to. It was as if chivalry in this context transcended romance, merging with a broader cultural ethic of care, attentiveness, and social responsibility. The effect was subtle, yet profound. She felt herself gradually opening up, not only to the men around her but to the country itself. Her reflections became more personal as she spent more time with Daniel. They visited the historic streets of Vigan, walked along the white sands of Boracay, and explored local markets together. Each interaction was punctuated by small, thoughtful gestures. He would anticipate her needs, carrying a wet umbrella after rain, suggesting breaks when the sun was too hot, or remembering the way she liked her coffee. At first, she thought these were isolated incidents, but over time, she realized they were consistent, reflecting a deeper cultural understanding of respect and attentiveness. She began to see love not as grand declarations or dramatic moments, but as a series of small, sincere actions that accumulate into trust and intimacy. The humor of the situation was not lost on her. She often chuckled at her own adjustments to these cultural norms. She found herself hesitating before allowing someone to carry her bags, instinctively asserting independence, then laughing at how absurdly delighted she felt when someone insisted. She laughed at herself when she caught herself expecting these gestures only from Daniel, only to find similar kindness from strangers. It became a game, a dance of trust and observation, and she reveled in the gentle absurdity of her growing cultural adaptation. Her journal became a tapestry of observations, reflections, and emotions. She wrote about the way Filipino men hold doors for anyone entering or leaving a room, how they insist on helping elders first, how they subtly check in with female friends or strangers to ensure safety. She wrote about the joy of being offered a seat without asking, the laughter shared over small misunderstandings in language, the warmth of family gatherings where every action is guided by thoughtfulness and respect. Over time, she noticed a shift within herself, a softening of expectations, a new appreciation for patience, and an understanding that love could be expressed in everyday deeds rather than dramatic statements. She also reflected on the societal impact of this chivalry. The patience, attentiveness, and consideration she witnessed seemed to ripple outward, influencing social interactions, family structures, and community cohesion. She began to understand that chivalry was not just a personal trait, but a cultural philosophy. It reinforced mutual respect, nurtured relationships, and created environments where emotional safety was a priority. Observing this, she realized that her own standards of love were evolving, informed not only by personal experiences, but by a cultural lens that valued subtle, consistent gestures of care. As days turned into weeks, she began experimenting with her own expressions of appreciation. She found herself opening doors, offering assistance, and sharing smiles more readily. She noticed the positive reactions, the subtle shift in interactions, and felt the quiet satisfaction of giving back a fraction of the kindness she had received. Her humor, often dry and self-deprecating, mingled with the lightheartedness of Filipino culture. Misunderstandings became opportunities for laughter, and awkward moments became bonds that deepened her connections. By the end of the first month, she was no longer a passive observer, but an active participant in the rhythm of Filipino life. She noticed how Filipino men, through countless small actions, had subtly redefined her expectations of love, respect, and partnership. What had begun as curiosity evolved into admiration. She realized that chivalry here was not performative or transactional. It was a language of care, spoken fluently through actions rather than words. Each gesture, no matter how small, contributed to a tapestry of trust, warmth, and emotional intimacy. In private moments, she reflected on the contrast with her past experiences. The independence she had prized in Ukraine no longer conflicted with accepting help. Instead, it felt like an opportunity to build connections, to participate in a shared dance of mutual respect. She realized that love could be simultaneously tender and practical, that respect could be playful, that patience could deepen emotional bonds. Each interaction with Daniel, each observation of others, reinforced a vision of love grounded in everyday kindness rather than grandiose gestures. Her transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. She laughed more easily, trusted more readily, and approached relationships with a newfound balance of vulnerability and self-assurance. Filipino chivalry had not only changed her perception of men and romantic relationships, it had expanded her understanding of community, family, and human connection. She had discovered that love, in its most enduring form, is expressed through consistent, thoughtful, and considerate actions. By the time she closed her journal each night, she realized she was no longer documenting observations from a distance. She was part of the story, a participant in a living culture where respect, attentiveness, and chivalry shaped not only relationships, but the rhythm of everyday life. Her journey had just begun, but already she knew that the lessons she was learning here would influence her standards of love, partnership, and human connection forever. As the days unfolded, she found herself settling into a rhythm with the city and the people around her. Manila's streets no longer felt alien, and the chaotic symphony of jeepneys, street vendors, and barking dogs had become oddly comforting. But the most profound changes were not external. They were internal, rooted in the growing connections she was forming, particularly with Daniel. Each interaction became a small lesson in patience, attentiveness, and emotional nuance. She began to see Filipino chivalry not just as cultural tradition, but as a language of love that spoke directly to her heart. Their routine was unremarkable by most standards, yet extraordinary for her. Morning walks through Lunita Park, where Daniel would subtly adjust his pace so she could take photos without feeling rushed, had become cherished moments. He would carry her camera bag or open the umbrella when the occasional rain shower arrived without her asking. At first, she had been hesitant to accept help, caught between ingrained independence and the polite insistence of his gestures. But gradually, she understood the rhythm. Accepting his attentiveness did not diminish her autonomy. It enriched the shared experience. One afternoon, they ventured to a local market in Quiapo. The narrow aisles were crowded with shoppers, vendors calling out prices, and the mingling scents of dried fish, herbs, and sizzling street food. She was attempting to bargain for a few trinkets when a hand gently touched her elbow. Daniel had spotted a potentially hazardous gap in the uneven pavement and guided her around it with a casual smile. It was such a small gesture, but it resonated deeply. It reflected the Filipino principle of being aware of those around you, acting not out of obligation, but out of genuine concern. She began noticing that this attentiveness extended beyond safety. It was in the way Daniel remembered the smallest details, the exact shade of coffee she preferred, her favorite tropical fruits, the way she laughed at certain jokes, or the books she lingered over in the local library. These observations, consistent and thoughtful, were acts of chivalry that transcended superficiality. In Ukraine, attentiveness was often sporadic and conditional, dependent on mood or circumstance. Here it was steady and intentional, a quiet force that shaped her perception of intimacy and care. Her humor, often sharp and self-contained, found new life in this environment. She laughed at herself when she realized she was flinching less at unsolicited help, smiling instead at small acts of kindness. She found herself teasing Daniel gently when he insisted on carrying her bag for the third time in a day, pretending to resist, only to secretly appreciate the effort. It became a playful exchange, a dance of mutual understanding and respect that reflected the subtleties of Filipino courtship. She discovered that chivalry in this culture was often playful, meant to foster connection rather than to impress or dominate. As their relationship deepened, she began meeting more of his friends and family. Each introduction was layered with the same culture of attentiveness she had observed in Daniel. When she entered a room, someone would offer a seat, another would check if she wanted a drink, and everyone engaged with her politely, making her feel welcomed without being the center of attention. She marveled at how effortlessly they balanced consideration and inclusivity. It was a demonstration of the Filipino belief that care for others is an essential social bond, not merely a romantic or performative gesture. During these visits, she observed subtle contrasts between Filipino and Ukrainian social norms. In Ukraine, gatherings often focused on direct conversation, sometimes competitive banter, and efficiency in hospitality. Here, interactions were layered with emotional intelligence, attentiveness, and nonverbal communication. Actions often spoke louder than words. An elder served her food first. A cousin guided her to a comfortable seat. Someone quietly anticipated her needs before she even expressed them. Each instance reinforced her growing understanding of how chivalry was woven into everyday life, shaping both social cohesion and personal relationships. Her appreciation of these gestures extended to public life as well. On the MRT, she watched men instinctively give up seats for women, elderly passengers, or those carrying children. In cafes, baristas greeted customers warmly, offering helpful suggestions and making space for personal comfort. Even casual strangers would hold doors, guide her around obstacles, or smile in acknowledgement of shared humanity. Each act, small on its own, formed a cumulative impression of a culture that valued attentiveness, respect, and the well-being of others. She began internalizing these behaviors, practicing subtle attentiveness herself, and noticing the positive effects on her interactions. Romantic gestures took on new meaning as she spent more time with Daniel. One evening, they walked along Manila Bay at sunset, the sky ablaze with colors reflecting off the water. Daniel had packed a small picnic, complete with her favorite snacks and a lightweight blanket. He guided her to a quiet spot, ensuring they had a comfortable view without disturbing others. She was struck by the thoughtfulness, the attentiveness to her comfort, the anticipation of her preferences, the unspoken care embedded in the planning. It wasn't grandiose, nor was it performative. It was a quiet, sustained commitment to making her experience joyful and comfortable. She reflected on her own past expectations of romance. In Ukraine, love often felt urgent, dramatic, or transactional. Attention could be fleeting, gestures sporadic, and care conditional. Here, she observed a different cadence: patience, attentiveness, and consistency over time. Actions mattered more than words, and the repetition of considerate behavior created a sense of security and emotional intimacy. She began to understand that love need not be declared loudly or frequently. It could be demonstrated through countless small, deliberate acts that accumulate into trust and affection. Humor continued to bridge cultural gaps. She laughed at herself when she mispronounced Tagalog words or misunderstood local expressions, and Daniel laughed along with her, correcting gently without condescension. Miscommunications became bonding moments, opportunities to engage more deeply and share emotional connection. She began to see that chivalry and emotional intelligence were inseparable. The ability to anticipate needs, communicate nonverbally, and respond with patience and empathy was itself a form of love. Her exploration of Filipino chivalry extended to community experiences as well. She attended festivals, visited local markets, and participated in family celebrations where acts of attentiveness and care were ubiquitous. Men would carry food, guide elders, and ensure children were safe, all while engaging in laughter, music, and celebration. It was a culture where care was a constant, integrated into every interaction. She realized that these behaviors were not just romantic gestures, they were reflections of a broader ethos that shaped personal and social relationships alike. Through these experiences, she began questioning her own cultural assumptions. The independence she had prized in Ukraine was not compromised by accepting help. Rather, it was complemented by shared responsibility and mutual care. She began seeing the value of trust, patience, and sustained attentiveness. The gestures of chivalry were not about control or hierarchy. They were about creating a harmonious, supportive environment. She found herself adopting these practices naturally, observing the joy they brought to others, and understanding the profound emotional resonance they carried. Her relationship with Daniel continued to blossom within this framework. Their conversations ranged from mundane daily routines to dreams for the future. He listened intently, asked questions, and responded with thoughtfulness. Each interaction reinforced her understanding of Filipino chivalry as a sustained, everyday commitment to care. She realized that she was experiencing a kind of love that was simultaneously practical, playful, tender, and emotionally enriching. It was not sudden or overwhelming, but steady, cumulative, and profoundly grounding. One day during a trip to Tagaytay, she noticed how Daniel navigated the rocky terrain with her safety in mind, offering his hand at the right moments, guiding her along narrow paths, and ensuring she had water and snacks. These gestures, seemingly minor, carried emotional weight. They communicated attentiveness, concern, and a desire for her well-being without words. She reflected on how such consistency could redefine emotional expectations in relationships. Love, she realized, could be demonstrated through care, patience, and mindfulness rather than grand declarations. She also began observing the impact of these behaviors on others. In restaurants, markets, and public spaces, Filipino men's attentiveness to women and elders created environments of comfort and security. Children were guided with patience, families moved with harmony, and community members interacted with consideration. She began seeing chivalry not merely as a romantic ideal, but as a social glue that nurtured relationships across generations and contexts. It became evident that these gestures, small as they were individually, built a foundation of trust, respect, and connection within the culture. Her humor, always a part of her personality, adapted to this environment. She laughed at herself when she attempted to replicate these gestures, fumbling in playful awkwardness, only to be gently guided by Daniel. The laughter was shared, mutual, and lightened every interaction. Missteps became opportunities for connection rather than embarrassment. Through humor, attentiveness, and shared experiences, she discovered a new form of intimacy, one that combined care, playfulness, and emotional resonance in ways she had never experienced before. By the end of this chapter in her journey, she realized that Filipino chivalry had transformed more than her perception of men. It had reshaped her understanding of love, partnership, and community. She had begun to internalize the values she observed: patience, attentiveness, emotional intelligence, and the importance of consistent care. These lessons were not theoretical. They were lived, embodied, and reflected back to her in countless small gestures. Her expectations of relationships had evolved, informed by a culture that prioritized both individual dignity and collective harmony. She marveled at how these lessons extended beyond romance. Her interactions with strangers, friends, and colleagues now carried a subtle attentiveness she had not possessed before. She began noticing the ripple effects of kindness and consideration, understanding that emotional investment in small, consistent actions could profoundly impact others. Her humor, empathy, and patience had expanded, shaped by a culture that embedded these values into daily life. She felt a quiet transformation, a deepening of her capacity to love, appreciate, and connect. Even in moments of solitude, she reflected on the profound emotional shift she was experiencing. Filipino chivalry had introduced a new lens through which to view relationships, not only romantic but communal. She understood now that love could be gentle, consistent, and playful. Respect and attentiveness could coexist with independence and self-assurance. She found herself anticipating the well-being of others naturally, laughing freely, and appreciating the subtleties of emotional nuance in ways that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Through this ongoing immersion, she realized that what she had once considered minor gestures were actually foundational to emotional connection. Holding a door, offering a hand, waiting patiently, or remembering small preferences were not merely social niceties. They were the building blocks of trust, intimacy, and shared joy. Filipino chivalry was a living language of care, spoken fluently through action, humor, and attentive presence. She had witnessed its transformative power and felt it shaping her own approach to love and relationships. By the end of her second month, she was fully aware that her standards of love had shifted. She no longer measured romance by dramatic declarations or fleeting passion. Instead, she evaluated relationships by consistency, attentiveness, empathy, and emotional reliability. Her understanding of intimacy had broadened to include playful gestures, subtle support, and the quiet assurance of care embedded in everyday life. Filipino chivalry had not only reshaped her perception of men, it had redefined her emotional vocabulary and her vision of partnership. And yet, the journey was far from over. Every interaction, every observation, and every shared experience added new layers to her understanding. She had begun to embody these lessons herself, creating a feedback loop of attentiveness and care. Humor, patience, and empathy had become tools not just for navigating cultural differences, but for deepening emotional bonds. In the process, she had discovered a new way of relating to the world, a lens colored by respect, love, and attentive kindness.